Welcome to Podnutz Daily for December 17th, 2008, episode number 123. You will notice I got off my butt and I edited and posted the latest episodes of Podnutz Daily. It was about 4 or 5 episodes last night. So if you want to catch up, you could definitely just go to the podnutzdaily.com or iTunes. Your RSS feed should now be filled with the past episodes. Sorry about that, guys. Just was able to do it last night, so getting back on the ball, so. Okay, want to talk about a couple things here. Replacing a motherboard in a Dell Optiplex. Now, Dell Optiplex, I think it's a GX270. There's also the Dimension 4600 small form factor one. It's almost the same exact case. And Dell kind of got clever with these, but also botched it up pretty bad too. The clever thing is, these motherboards come out on a tray. You don't have to take any screws out of these things to get these motherboards out. You just pull a little lever on the inside of the thing, pop the tray out, the whole motherboard comes out in one shot. Then I think there's one screw to unscrew the motherboard from the tray. I'm not even sure about that, maybe. Anyway, so that's really neat. So if you have to do a repair on like a GX270 or one of those small form factor models, an Optiplex GX270, or a Dell, I think it's 4600, but the small form factor one, Dimension. Don't go unscrewing all the screws out of the motherboard. Notice that there's a tray there. Pull up the lever, pull it out, and you got the whole motherboard out in one shot. We replaced a motherboard like that today, which is nice. The problem with those motherboards, though, is they are famous for capacitors leaking in that model. So, though they had a good idea of ease of use and like intuitive, being able to repair it intuitively, the problem is the motherboards are failing like crazy. So, at least it's easy to get them out. I was also working on an XPS 400, I think it was, Dell Dimension desktop, big white one, and I had a problem. It wouldn't even start. I talked about this yesterday. It wouldn't even start up. I replaced the RAM. I got it to start up, and now the thing constantly reboots. And when I tried to install Windows XP, here's the thing. If I try to install Windows XP from one of my disks because the recovery partition was wiped out of the machine. So I had to use one of my disks, and I was going to use the product key off the side of this particular machine. If I used an older version of XP, as I tried to run setup in Windows XP, it would load all the drivers in the very beginning there, and before it would start copying files to the hard drive, it would fail and say PCI.sys. It would blue screen, and the problem would be PCI.sys. I believe, and Mitch helped me out with this, he sent me a link, I believe it was the PCI Express card wasn't being recognized or cooperating with the version of Windows I was trying to put on. If I slipstreamed Service Pack 2 or Service Pack 3 onto that disk, it worked. So something in the latest Service Pack 2 and Service Pack 3, if you slipstream that on, I use Nlight, which is a great program. It allows you to take an XP disk and then add a bunch of junk to it, so you don't have to do it after the fact. It'll be part of the installation. Nlight's free. You can just Google it and pull that down. You can make an ISO. You keep the ISO on your hard drive and then burn the disk whenever you need to. At least you have the ISO in a safe place. And back it up. Back up the ISO too. That handled it. Then it got through the setup process. Everything was fine. So, okay, update your malware programs. Next thing I want to talk about. Oftentimes, lately especially for us, we'd try to remove spyware from machines, and we would find that the machine will not let these spyware programs update themselves. And this could be caused by spyware or whatever other reason it could be. Maybe you can't connect to the internet for whatever particular reason right at that point. The way to handle this is go get the latest download for super anti-spyware or malware bytes. Don't put one on your flash drive and leave it there for 3 months, because every month or so they update their program, so it has the latest updates built into the downloadable, the executable, I mean. So every month or so, make sure you refresh all of your malware programs, anti-malware programs on your flash drive. This way, if you can't get the latest updates when you install the software, at least you already have the latest updates built into your program right there. All right, I'm going to pick on my dad a little bit. I'm not worried about it because I'm sure he's not watching. But he had a couple of doozies today. First thing I want to talk about, this one's not funny, but this is a good tip. When you're putting in a processor, especially on a socket 478, because there's lots of pins on a socket 478. It also happened to me with an AMD socket 939 is famous for this. If the processor doesn't you're installing the processor on the motherboard, and it doesn't just fall right into the slot. You shouldn't have to put almost any pressure on it to get it into the slot, into the socket. If you do, I also wouldn't recommend using your finger to push it down. Use something like a toothpick or something that's not a conductor, but also not going to smear oil onto the processor, like your finger, and push it down. If it doesn't push down super easy, then don't force it. It happened today where we actually pushed the processor down and it bent one of the corner pins completely around in half. So the processor seemed like it was flush onto the socket, but it definitely wasn't. It was wobbling a little bit. That's another thing. The processor has to be it will be flush on that into that socket. There should be no wobble at all. It should be flush in there. So make sure it's flush, then pull down the little locking lever. If it's not going in, do not force it. Make sure all the pins are straight. I like to straighten out the pins with a toothpick. If I notice the processor's not going in smooth, I just immediately pull it up and I look for any pins that are bent, even the slightest little bit, they might cause it to not be able to push in. So you don't want to force it down, pull the processor out, look at the pins that are bent, and push them back in with a toothpick. You don't want to use anything metal because you don't want to transmit electricity across the pins. Use a toothpick and you could bend the pins in the spot, and that should fall right down. Once it's flush, then pull down the locking lever. I'll get to the other thing my dad did later. It's also handy. Had a customer come in. He had a computer with a crashed hard drive. I wasn't able to really inspect the hard drive to see if we could recover anything, but as an immediate fix, all he wanted, and he had 2 floppy disks in his hand. He copied some information from his hard drive before it crashed to these floppy disks, and he wanted to put whatever was on these floppy disks onto a CD. For you computer repair technicians out there, have a floppy disk drive handy. I use an external USB floppy disk drive, and once in a blue moon, somebody will come in with floppy disks, and I can easily throw them into that drive, plug it right into my Workbench PC, or if you want to put a floppy drive in your Workbench PC, and then you copy all of his files onto a CD or wherever the hell he wants to put them, a flash drive or whatever. So even though floppy drives may seem dead in your eyes, and I cringe every time I see somebody walk around with a floppy disk, people still use them. So have an external drive handy, or have one built into your bench PC, or have one nearby. Another customer came in. This was a customer who had a hard drive that, you know, the expression looks like that hard drive went through a war, or not that hard drive, but anything. Like if it's really beat up, you're like, it looks like that thing went through a war. This computer he brought in was a Dell Inspiron 6000. Literally went through a war. It was in Iraq and just pretty much got demolished. I mean, sand, no bombs